Hi everyone. Welcome to our channel and enjoy your viewing. We will be very happy if you like and subscribe. The events begin at the royal ball. A young and influential emperor dances with another princess. She is delighted, but he does not like the girl too much, not his style. Music plays, couples change, the waiter serves wine. The emperor dances with another. Pairs change again. This time the guy suddenly and passionately takes a beautiful girl to dance. The young lady and everyone around were surprised by such abruptness, but he seems to be satisfied. The music ends, the dance stops, but the boy is in no hurry to say goodbye to the girl. For him, this dance was not bad. Something in the girl touched him. She is confused and surprised. The emperor thanked for the dance and gently kissed the snow-white hand of the young girl. The emperor of Croyson, Carloy Croyton, recommended himself. Behind him, the young ladies are discussing the ball and wondering why even today, on such an important day, the empress does not dance with him. Her father, Duke Hans de Lois, is also surprised and angry on such an important day. When so many respectable people have gathered for the royal ball, they could dance at least once. The empress is her father's favorite daughter. Yvonne de Louis sits on the throne in an incredible blue dress with jewels that perfectly complement the look. Yellow hair falls on fragile shoulders. Green eyes are captivating. She is thinking about something, worried and upset. The girls are gathered around her. They assure her that the emperor dances with others only out of courtesy. The empress remembers what happened a year ago. Then she and Carloy got married. The clinking of glass is heard. The emperor in the middle of the hall announces that he has news. He says that a year unexpectedly passed after the wedding with the empress. However, during this time she did not bring him a successor, and this is a serious problem. The public is in shock and does not understand what is happening. Duke Hans de Lois seems displeased. The emperor says that with such problems in his marriage with Yvonne, corrections should be made. He hopes that this is the right decision that will bring positive changes to the atmosphere in general. Some of the audience ask what changes the emperor is talking about. Everyone is surprised and does not understand anything. Instead, the emperor replied that they would find out everything. At the same time, Duke Rodin's daughter, Lady Rodin, arrived in the hall. Incredibly beautiful. In a delicate pink dress with lace as she steps, the dress shimmers with colors and flowers are scattered next to the lady. She wears gold jewelry that perfectly matches the image. Black hair is braided in a neat hairstyle. Brown eyes glow in the light of her beauty. The empress was surprised. She did not like this girl. Lady Rodin addressed the emperor. "Your Majesty." He passionately hugged the girl to him and replied that he was embarrassed when she called him that. The audience at that time is surprised. The dukes are trying to find out what is happening and are outraged by the emperor's behavior. He looked at them and announced that he was going to appoint Lady Orden as the second empress of Croyson. She leaned against the boy. He gently hugged her from behind. The people began to whisper. One of the dukes said that it was impossible, this would not happen, because the status of the second empress was cancelled 200 years ago. This cannot happen today. It is unacceptable to appoint a new empress without any reason, and it is not subject to appeal. However, the emperor does not seem to hear anyone. He feeds his beloved strawberries and says that she has revealed her own treasure to him, and that he, as an emperor, cannot help but take responsibility for his own actions. Lady Rodin again coquettishly called the emperor His Majesty, laughing and snuggling up to him. From the other end of the hall, Duke de Lois turned angrily to the emperor. He was displeased and angry. The whole hall stopped. One of the boys started shouting angrily at the emperor. The girls are whispering. Everyone is surprised and outraged. Carloy turned to the boy who was shouting and replied that she was his empress, and he shouldn't be jealous. Lady Rodin does not like the atmosphere in the hall. The emperor continued that it was all for the sake of the descendant. Lady de Lois then flashed her pure green eyes angrily for a second. However, she quickly pulled herself together, returned to a state of indifference and coldness, and replied that she would obey the will of the emperor, and it would be as he said. The people in the hall whispered. Some shouted that this was unthinkable. Some asked about the thoughts of the empress. People imagined what would happen next, and were afraid of such changes in such a future. They were unhappy with Lady de Lois's position. After the empress's answer, the emperor bit his lip and thought that the reaction was the same as always, and he did not like it. But he also quickly pulled himself together and replied with satisfaction that if Lady de Lois did not mind, then everything would be fine, and it would be as he said. The emperor also said that he hoped for help in consecrating Kiana as Empress Duke. He placed his fork on his plate and bowed to end this speech, announcing that he was busy. The emperor and the new empress left the hall in each other's arms. People did not stop talking, indignant and whispering. Duke Delois did not understand what kind of delusion. He felt sick. He didn't want to be in this hall. He didn't want to hear what he heard. And most of all, he did not want to engage in the consecration of an unknown person as empress. A competitor of his beloved daughter who was not at all worthy of either her or the emperor. The people were even more surprised by this. People felt sick. Lady Delois was addressed by her servants. They asked questions about the further course of action. However, the girl replied that we cannot do anything. Her eyes lit up. She sternly replied that the emperor's will was unchallenged and everyone had to obey the order. She remembered all the events of that crazy day. So, a year after her wedding, her husband brings the new girl to the hall, where their celebration was taking place, and publicly declares her the second empress, saying that this is all for the sake of the offspring. The empress does not want to know anything more, to understand. She silently leaves the hall, slamming the door loudly. A year ago, a cloudless, sunny day, a church decorated from the inside with red roses. The ringing of the bell is heard. It is the wedding day of Emperor Carloy and Yvonne. Duke Hans Deloit leads his daughter, dressed in a beautiful white dress, to her betrothed, the emperor. Hans Delois is very worried and seems to feel guilty towards Yvonne. He tries to talk to his daughter, but the girl, with a slight smile on her lips, assures his father that everything is fine, and he has nothing to worry about. The Duke, almost crying, gently hugs his only daughter and wishes her luck in her married life. The emperor, who contemplates this moving picture, looks displeased. It disgusts him to look at the embrace of father and daughter, because he knows that Yvonne is being married off by force. The Duke, having accepted the separation from his child, tries to flatter the emperor. An emotional Hans Delois asks his future son-in-law to be kind to Yvonne, because she is just an innocent child who knows nothing about this cruel life. Fury flares in Carloy's brown eyes. Shocked by such hypocrisy, the emperor, gritting his teeth, asks the Duke why such a loving father like him gives his daughter in marriage against her will. Carloy plunges into his thoughts, from which it can be understood that he has no tender feelings for his bride. Looking at how the stout hand of Hans Delois holds the pale and fragile hand of Yvonne, the emperor bitterly realizes that the Duke is simply sacrificing his daughter for power. The emperor knows full well that Hans Deloit, as vile and cunning as a snake, will do anything to become part of the imperial family, and one day obtain the coveted throne. He remembers all the troubles that Hans Delois brought to his family, chasing the unlimited power and riches that could give belonging to the imperial court. The Duke took the lives of many members of the Carloy family. He killed his mother, father, and other people dear to the young emperor. Hans Delois tried to kill Carloy himself, strangling the boy with a handkerchief. But at the last moment, the future emperor was able to save himself. The emperor's face contorted with anger. Carloy grits his teeth as he remembers all the pain he had to endure. Suddenly, the pealing of the church bell is heard again. The Duke, holding his daughter's hand, brings Carloy back to reality, telling him that the time has come. Yvonne's face radiates sadness. Carloy smiles sheepishly at Yvonne and says he didn't expect to see the girl even at their wedding. After all, according to him, there are rumors that the girl is very weak. Whenever little Yvonne was sick, her father would take her in his arms and gently rock her, trying to ease the child's suffering. Hans Delois even brought his own maids to the palace, refusing the imperial ones. Yvonne, with her lids covered and her blonde hair loose, is simply stunning in a pink dress adorned with purple diamonds. The emperor compliments the bride. "You are really beautiful." Carloy then looks into Yvonne's eyes and says that she looks a lot like her father. It really is. The same blonde hair, the same thin eyebrows, the same emerald eyes. The girl is just a copy of Hans Delois. Only her look, unlike her father's, shows not complacency, but deep sadness. Carloy is a little confused by the lack of response from the green-eyed beauty, and does not understand what she expects from him. In his opinion, passionate but insincere statements about the love he does not feel for her will look ridiculous. The emperor turns to himself again, not understanding why a girl who has been carried in his arms since childhood should marry a man who will never give her his heart. Finally coming to his senses, an exasperated Karloy tries to insult Yvonne by saying that she is as proud as her father. The girl looks up at Karloy for a moment, then looks away and, sighing as if from boredom, answers disinterestedly, "Yeah." The guests who are at the wedding begin to whisper in surprise, not understanding what is happening. Karloy is shocked by the girl's words. Yvonne and her father's eyes meet. Scenes from his childhood reappear in the Emperor's memory. A boy with his hands tied sits in a dark, cold room. Two tall men are looking at him, one of whom is Hans de Lois. Karloy gets even more annoyed, his hands clenching and shaking, but the young Emperor manages to pull himself together. He casually tells Yvonne that he doesn't care about this marriage, and he'll leave her alone right after the ceremony. Without hearing a word from the bride, Karloy turns sharply and walks away. Everyone present at the wedding tries to stop the Emperor, but it is too late. Karloy disappeared through the door. Only his heavy steps are heard from the corridor. The Duke is dissatisfied with this behavior and is going to find the Emperor. But he is stopped by his daughter, who uncertainly grabs her father's elbow and says that she will talk to Karloy herself. Hearing the conversation between Yvonne and Hans de Lois, the audience begins to murmur unhappily. People are outraged by the behavior of a girl who became the Emperor's wife a few minutes ago and already wants to influence him. A brown-eyed man, probably Karloy's servant, leaves the hall and goes to his master's room. He turns to His Majesty and whispers to him about Yvonne's conversation with the Duke. The Emperor hums thoughtfully, and then, indignant at such insolence, he raises his eyebrows and through clenched jaws shouts his wife's name, "Yvonne de Lois." It's night in the yard. The wedding feast is long over. The whole empire is falling asleep. The moonlight illuminates the austere towers of the castle, makes its way to the windows, where people have long been immersed in their own dreams. However, the light is still on in one room. An important conversation takes place in the bedroom of the Emperor and the new Empress. Karloy, without hiding his irritation and contempt, wondered what Yvonne wanted to talk to him about. The girl only manages to say 2 words of appeal to the Emperor, as he immediately interrupts her. Karloy asks if she is aware of his attitude towards her father, to which the girl replies that she does. However, the young Emperor sarcastically points out that the girl does not know about his true attitude towards the Duke. He hates him so much that if he had his way, he would kill every person with the surname de Lois in the entire empire. Karloy enunciates each word clearly, looking into Yvonne's bright green eyes. However, the Empress shows no emotion. Instead, she questions her fiancé if he is really capable of such a thing. Karloy was surprised by this question. He did not understand what answer the girl wanted from him. She asked if he could get rid of her family if he wanted to. A thought comes to her which she voices out loud. She and Karloy need to have a child in order to play it safe, and the father was satisfied and did not interfere in the affairs of the young family. Yvonne de Lois continues to speak firmly to the Emperor. She claims that she has no claim to Karloy's heart and love. But in public they have to play the role of a couple in love, even if they don't have children yet. She says that she is not so unintelligent as to demand love from Karloy. Her only wish is for the Emperor to live peacefully and happily. The young girl's words annoy Croyton. He turned to her in an evil and fairy tale tone, but he quickly got over himself and answered that he was not her father, and if Yvonne made a mistake, she would lose her head. The girl did not like such a tone and such words. No one has ever talked to her like that, and she will not allow the situation to change. She turned to the Emperor. Karloy had already turned his back to the girl, but hearing the tone of her appeal, he sharply turned his head in her direction. He replied without giving Yvonne a word that she could become Empress. Yvonne de Lois interrupted the Emperor and finished the sentence for him. She could be Empress, but then the empire would come to an end. Karloy Croyton left the bedroom and left the girl alone. She didn't object and didn't show any emotion. Morning. The clatter of heels can be heard in the corridor. The Empress approaches in a delicate dress with a green bow that matches the color of her eyes. Servants bow to her. The girl had only gone a few steps when the servants began to discuss the latest news concerning Yvonne. The girls talk about the fact that the Empress has been removed from all state affairs, and their relationship with their husband is getting worse. She approaches the table where Karloy is already sitting. They are supposed to have breakfast together, but the Emperor is unhappy with Yvonne's delay and speaks about it out loud. In a commanding tone, he informs the girl that he hopes that she refrains from frequent meetings with the Duke. For a moment, the girl's eyes flashed with anger and sadness, but she quickly pulled herself together and answered that she would listen to the Emperor. He continued to speak, because Yvonne was unhappy with the cold. He announced that she should not invite her father to the palace either. Carloy began to say that her father was allowing himself, but before he could finish the word, the girl interrupted him and replied, "Okay." This outraged him. He slammed his fist on the table and shouted that she should listen to him to the end and not interrupt him. The Emperor clenched his fist and went on to say that he was outraged by the behavior of the Duke of Deloy. He constantly meddles in the family affairs of a young couple, and this is unacceptable. Carloy complains that the Duke even demands information from him about dinners with his daughter. Yvonne replied emotionlessly that she didn't think her father was interested in such details. He has enough of his own affairs. The girl started to eat breakfast, and Carloy continued to tell her that she was wrong. Her father is interested in everything, and it annoys him. With an irritated tone and sunken eyes, the Emperor asserted that the Duke de Lois was following the pair. Yvonne replied wearily that it wasn't. The girl's father has nothing to track down, because everyone in the court knows about the Emperor's hatred for his own wife. Such a sharp answer surprised and stunned the boy. She got irritated. She exclaimed, what should she do so that the Emperor would come to her in the palace? But he had already turned his back and was about to leave the hall. However, hearing his wife's words without turning around, he answered in a mysterious tone that he would come. But he has one condition. Only if Yvonne disappears, he will come to her. Such words irritated the girl, and thus the relationship between the couple became even colder. At all the imperial holidays and balls, the couple did not dance together, did not speak. They did not even look at each other. And on the first day after their anniversary, the Emperor didn't even show up for dinner with Yvonne. Instead, he brought Lady Roden into the hall and was going to dine with her. Yvonne was surprised by this, which caused similar emotions in the servants. The Emperor, out of politeness but rather to annoy the Empress, asked her if she would not mind having dinner with him and Kiana. In a mysterious tone, the Emperor himself answered his own question. I suppose not. Putting his arm around Lady Roden's waist, Carloy confronted Yvonne with the fact. He said that Kiona would be handling the Empress's affairs, so Yvonne should befriend her. He raised questions about the position of his first Empress. She sat motionless in her chair, her eyes burning and her body showing anger. The servants around were worried about their Empress and tried to defuse the situation. There was a tense atmosphere in the hall. In front of Yvonne stood her husband, hugging another woman who was to become the second Empress. He demanded from her a positive answer to the question about her friendship with Lady Roden. In a mocking tone, Carloy wondered if it was the hero who had taught Yvonne good manners. Kiana waited for the end of this strange scene with a childish expression on her face. Yvonne pulled herself together and answered her husband without any emotion. She informed him that she did not wish to upset His Majesty, but Lady Roden was not yet an Empress. Of course, the Emperor gave an order for her appointment and it is being carried out. But only one day has passed, and crowning takes more time. Without stopping, she turned to Kiana. She was confused, but Lady Delois continued her work. She said she understood Lady Roden's intentions to gain status through the Emperor's road, but if too hasty, it may harm the name of His Majesty. After her words, the intelligent Empress invited Kiana to the table. The situation diffused. Lady Roden politely introduced herself to the Empress and apologized for her rudeness. Carloy intervened in this conversation. He said it was all very unfortunate. With irony, Yvonne told about her feelings for Kiana, true love. The Emperor also announced that Kiana would soon assume the duties of Empress, and he hopes that she will not interfere. Yvonne at that time tried to keep everything in her hands. She quickly pulled herself together and replied in an innocent tone that she should have minimal responsibilities. Carloy asked if the girl really thought so. She doesn't solve anything, in his opinion. Yvonne got angry. A depressing atmosphere prevailed in the hall again. Kiana understood that this conversation was not good. She was frightened, sweat appeared on her face. Lady Roden took Carloy's hand, complimented Yvonne and offered to speed up the process of transfer of duties. Kiona excitedly said that everyone would only rejoice at the appearance of the new Empress. She was all glowing, but Carloy seemed displeased. Utensils fell from Yvonne's hands. Servants scrambled to clean, worried about the Empress's health. She was too irritated. At that time, Kian did not understand where her lover was looking and asked him, "Is it for the Empress?" But he coldly replied that what was on the hand, and why was she so interested in his hand? Yvonne understood where Carloy was looking. His serious, unknown eyes annoyed her. She did not understand why he looked at her with such a blank look. It oppressed her. Suddenly, Carla felt sick. He had a sharp headache. He was quick to say that Kiana was right. The Emperor replied that the Empress would do everything quickly, and they needed to go. Kiana didn't like this turn of events, but she obeyed Carloy's will, wished Yvonne a good day with a sneer, and got up from the table. The servants were confused. They shouted for the Emperor to stay, but the couple was already moving away from the hall. Yvonne turned to her maid, Marian. She honestly, without any disappointment, admitted that she did not know how to be an empress, because she got into the palace thanks to the influence of her father. But she was not taught anything. It was really a big problem, the girl thought. At that time, at the other end of the castle, in Kiana and Carloy's room, an interesting conversation was taking place. The Emperor scolded the girl, but she did not understand what she had done wrong this time. Sitting on a chair and turning her head to the Emperor, she asked if he meant that they were holding hands. While unbraiding her hair, the girl was indignant about why Carloy can do whatever she wants, but he limits her in everything. Looking at her own reflection in the mirror, she continued to speak. She claimed that they have contact, and she has the right to do various actions that are annoying in the presence of witnesses. Carloy sighed wearily. He replied that he did not mean that. Instead, he is interested in why Kiana entrusted all the work to the Empress, because she doesn't understand that she will specially delay it. Lady Roden, already with loose hair that fell in black strands over her fragile shoulders, replied that she wanted to see her reaction. The Emperor himself invited her to share a table with the Empress. What's more, so fast that she didn't even have time to get dressed. The Emperor replied that the role of Kiana was held by Yvonne. Therefore, she does not have to do anything extra. She angrily asked if she was needed only to arouse jealousy in the Empress. Carloy angrily answered that Kiana doesn't know what kind of person Yvonne is. She doesn't know how to be jealous, and it's impossible to hurt her. Lady Roden was surprised. She replied that the Emperor was wrong. His wife had emotions and feelings, and he should let her get closer. Carloy abruptly took the girl by the shoulder. He replied that the stone has more emotions and is more pleasant to talk to. Yvonne will never be on his side, and Kiana talks nonsense. However, Lady Roden insisted on her point. She claimed that Yvonne was worried today, but Carloy stopped her. The Emperor said that his wife was brought up as a princess and was not used to rudeness. She hates him like all her relatives. And Carloy saw his own wife as an inveterate enemy with a changeable nature. The girl suddenly freed herself from the Emperor's painful grip and replied that her father had already conducted some investigations. Kneading her hand, she continued. She replied that as regards the theft of their majesties, they are all dead. Even of the village where the children were kept, only ruins remained. No one survived, and looking for evidence in the desert is pointless. Carla didn't like that answer. He ordered to look for something anyway. Something should be found out in any case. Tiredly but interested, Lady Roden asked why. She wondered who the Emperor was looking for. Pause. To bring the boy back to reality, Kiana had to call him once more. He replied irritably that he was only looking for proof of Duke Delois's guilt. Kiana knew in her mind that it was all a lie, but she answered, "Okay." She was not interested in the Emperor's intentions. A few weeks later, interesting events took place again in the imperial court. Carloy watched Duke Delois through the window. He expressed his displeasure to a friend, because the Duke walked around his yard and behaved as if he were at home. The friend replied that Delois was angry with the Emperor. The Emperor expressed that it was during the presence of the Duke that the work of transferring the responsibilities to the Empress went slowly. He ordered the process to be expedited and ended the conversation due to feeling unwell. Carloy admitted that he had long since regretted assigning the Empress a lot of work. It was his mistake. The interviewer replied that he would try to talk to Yvonne, but she might get upset and tell her father about everything. Carloy called out, "Horton!" The Emperor did not want to hear about the Duke in his cabinet. He was angry about it. He began to apologize. The Emperor interrupted him and ordered him to go and perform his duties. Looking at Duke Delois, Carloy remembered his own childhood, when he himself informed the little Emperor that he ordered to kill him. But he mocked the child who could not do anything, and ordered to thank God that he was able to save himself. Only for this his worthless luck was enough. Carloy was further enraged by his own memories. In his office, the Emperor asked Horton if he had spoken to the Empress. He could not concentrate on the papers and was angry that his assistant was silent. He replied that he had spoken, but Yvonne replied that she would mean it. However, weeks have passed since that time, and he does not understand whether the Empress is working at all. Carloy got up from his desk and answered firmly that he would visit his wife. In an elegant suit that emphasized his massive shoulders and perfect figure, he looked particularly handsome. The aide was surprised and asked if the Emperor was planning to visit Yvonne right now. Along the corridor, along the blue carpet, the Emperor walked quickly to his wife, followed by his assistant and servants. The rest looked surprised and discussed what was going to happen. Carloy was infuriated by this reaction. He ordered to stop this movement and conversations. As soon as he approached the Empress's chambers, her servant stuttered and replied that Her Majesty was now. But before she had time to finish, the Emperor decided to enter Yvonne's room without permission. The maid did not allow passage. However, Horton scolded her for such behavior and ordered to immediately give passage to the Emperor. They had just entered the room when Carloy stepped on the glass. The servants got worried and began to warn that the entire floor was made of glass and that it was dangerous. The Emperor did not understand anything. He was worried and moved on. When Carloy found himself in his wife's room, he stopped. Everyone was speechless because there was complete chaos. Furniture, shards of glass, dishes were lying everywhere. Yvonne, in her pajamas, exclaimed that she had ordered the maids not to turn on the lights and why her order was being disobeyed. The Emperor, in a commanding tone, forced the maid to tell what was happening here, but she replied that nothing special. At that time, the Empress did not stop being indignant. She shouted to the maids to turn off the light, but her order was not obeyed. Yvonne, covered in blood, covering her eyes and ears in pain, begged to turn off the light and leave her alone. She had a pitiful appearance. Tangled hair, teary eyes, cut hands, thin. It was obvious that she had not eaten for a long time, but she still remained incredibly beautiful. She opened her bright green eyes for a moment and froze in surprise and despair. The Emperor was standing before her, and she was in this form. There was glass on the bed from a broken beach. She was covered in blood trying to say the words of greeting. Carloy abruptly took the girl's hand. He was no joke when he saw the blood on her palm. Their eyes met. She abruptly took her hand away and pressed it to her. She answered why the Emperor did not warn about his visit. He was instead unhappy with her reaction to his touch. She felt as if she had touched a bug. Yvonne replied, "Isn't it?" He began to say that this is not a room, but a dump. I asked if the girl always behaves like this and how to understand it. She is not even ashamed that she was caught in this state. This is terrible and unacceptable. Carloy began to talk about the reason for his own visit. He is here for the coronation ceremony of the second Empress. He asked her to do everything as soon as possible, but this did not happen and he is unhappy. Looking down on his wife, he concluded that she was not up to the job. He understands that the Duke orders everything to be delayed, but he is ordered to hurry. At that time, his wife's servant spoke displeasedly about the Emperor. She spoke maliciously and mockingly about how businesslike but stupid he was. His assistant supported the woman. He was ashamed of Carloy. With an iron look, the Emperor ordered his wife not to be a fool, to follow orders. She, sitting on the sofa and barely speaking, tried to reach him, uttered words of appeal. Yvonne said that Carloy was a violent person and stood up abruptly. Barely standing, but decisively, the girl spoke. The Emperor treats her only as an emotionless thief who only hates him and hides behind her father's back. Imagining in her head, she continued that if she wanted to, she would cancel the ceremony altogether. Or maybe throw Lady Roden out of the yard. She has influence and can use it. As she spoke, Yvonne envisioned herself leaving the Empire in the dark night of Qian, how she wanted to. She imagined herself at the table, and continued that she could even manage all the affairs of the Empire without Carloy. But she doesn't need it. The girl shouted to her husband that she was trying to live like a gray mouse. She tried not to disturb the Emperor, not to interfere in his affairs, but he only says that she is bad. Carloy looked at Yvonne with interest. He asked in a strange tone if the girl really does everything for him. He asked if it was so. He looked at his wife and understood that she was not at all like his father. Carloy took the girl by the shoulder and expressed his thanks, but for his sake she could do one more thing. The girl looked at the emperor questioningly, ready for a new portion of abomination. Leaning very close to the girl's face, almost touching her cheek, he quietly said that he wanted her to disappear. Forever. And she never caught the emperor's eyes again. He hates her and will always hate her. The girl's green eyes lit up. She turned sharply away from him, realizing that she also hated this person. Carloy said he could see the girl had nothing more to say. Walking to the door, he said that a father who loves his daughter and worries about her can be understood in the desire to repel his daughter's competitor. But only greed prevented him from taking root in the yard. The emperor replied to the unfortunate girl that he did not need anything from her. She only has to deal with the organization of the ceremony. He left the room before saying that he had no desire to stay there another second. He ordered to train all his wife's servants, hire a new one and train them so that such a mess would not happen again. But the emperor was followed by his assistant and his wife's servant. They began to speak to him, asking for forgiveness. He asked if this happens often, to which they stuttered and answered no. The emperor turned to the woman who was talking to him and replied that she should not stand here. She did not understand what he meant, asked him again. Carloy pulled out a handkerchief covered in blood. He began to say that the empress had cut her hand badly, and her servant knew nothing about it, was wandering around and could not help. "Shouldn't a servant follow the empress?" he asked. The woman was drenched in sweat and could not utter a word. He turned to face her. She bowed her head, admitted her guilt and asked for forgiveness. When the maid left the corridor, Carloy turned to his assistant. He asked if he would be smart enough to complete the task that the emperor had given him now. When he didn't get an answer, he called out to Horton. They had a lot of work to do today. A few days later, again in his office, Carloy told Horton about his successes. He was right. If the empress wants it, she will do anything. The process of preparing for the ceremony went according to plan. But Horton did not understand why the work was done well, and the emperor was dissatisfied with something. What is wrong with him? When the assistant was about to leave the office, he was stopped by Carloy. He asked about the date of the ceremony, not taking his eyes off the papers. Horton announced that the date was set, but the emperor slapped his forehead. How could he forget? On that day, the anniversary of his mother's heart. The assistant was surprised and asked, how could such a moment be missed? Carloy knew very well that his wife could not forget such a thing. But it was too late to change anything, and he simply resigned himself. He remembered Yvonne's green eyes for a moment and wondered about her intentions. At that time, Yvonne was sitting in her room in a luxurious, delicate dress by the window. The wind was blowing her hair, and she was thinking about something. Strange sounds were heard from the balcony on the second floor, which attracted the emperor's attention. He was distracted for a moment, but he will be back soon. He was called. A meeting was held in the hall. In the middle of the round table sat the emperor, dressed in a strict black suit that matched his face. His advisors sat on his left and right and decided important issues. Duke de Lois spoke of the empress. He argued that if in their empire it was possible to do this with one's own wives, then very soon she would... But he was interrupted by the emperor. He finished the sentence for him about the ruin of the country, made a sarcastic look of surprise, and replied that if only because of the appearance of the second empress the country would collapse, then such was the fate. The Duke of Deloy continued his. He argued his own judgments by the fact that 200 years ago the emperor had only one wife. He asked what the emperor would do if the people revolted. Before that, rumors had already spread through the capital that Lady Roden would soon do all the work, while the empress is alive. Carloy boringly replied that it was the duke who was always worried about his daughter's health. He did not burden her with work, but everyone understands the reason for the absence of offspring. And she understood everything. There were no objections. Instead, Carloy replied that if the duke and everyone else were of the view that the official wife should do all the duties, he understood them. But he worries that Yvonne's fragile body may not be able to withstand all the problems and all the work. He claimed that they were very lucky that Kiana was willing to help with public affairs. However, the duke began to shout that only a madman could schedule a ceremony on the date of his mother's death. Last year, the emperor searched his house on this day, and he wants to offend him again, but in a different way. The emperor could not bear such insults and exclaimed that the Duke de Lois had lost his mind. He said without any emotion that he was disgusted by the death of his wife and ordered to stop this mess. The duke tried to say something more in his own defense, but the meeting was over. The emperor wished everyone a good day and left the hall. A worried assistant hurried after him. He did not recommend that Carlo walk alone without protection. But the emperor was thinking. He thought that the duke must be out of his mind. He thought that the blood of the people he killed would be enough for a whole river. So what is the matter with the death of his wife, who died because of his intrigues? The aide suggested that the empress might have deliberately chosen such a date. The emperor stopped for a moment and wondered what he meant. Horton replied that in this way Yvonne could give her father a reason to turn against him again. Carloy thought about it. She could take revenge on him like this. But Carloy's thoughts were interrupted. The maid informed that Lady Roden was requesting a meeting with the emperor. He assigned her to the garden, away from prying eyes and ears. A storm was raging outside. It was raining terribly. Carloy paused for a moment. He saw Yvonne in an incredibly beautiful dress. She sat in the rain and caught drops in her hand. The aide asked if everything was fine with the emperor. He answered that yes. But what is the empress doing in the garden? She does not have such permission. Horton answered that this is a private garden of the imperial family. The emperor himself rarely comes here. The garden is not well guarded. The empress likes to visit here. Carloy decided to directly ask what Yvonne was doing here. The maid did not like this initiative. She began to worry. But Carloy still asked what Yvonne was doing in his garden. She replied that she was just walking. But he forbade her to enter this garden without his permission. The emperor ordered to teach the wife's servants again. But she protested that it was only her fault and no one else's. However, the emperor insisted on his own. Also, the emperor, not missing the opportunity, asked Yvonne a question about the date of the ceremony. After all, her mother died on this day. The girl's leg went from under her feet. She could not utter a word. But Carloy continued to put pressure on his wife. He accused her of quarreling with the duke at the meeting. The girl asked for forgiveness. However, Carloy was still dissatisfied. He leaned close to the girl and asked why she had so much time that she didn't have enough time for a walk. Is it not possible, at least for a day, not to appear in front of your eyes? The emperor got angry, but suddenly a branch crackled. Yvonne fell on top of Carloy in shock. Leaves fell around and they both did not understand what was happening. The emperor and empress fell to the ground. Carloy didn't understand anything. Yvonne just fell on him with her fragile body. The pair had never been so close to each other before. They looked at each other and did not understand anything. At that moment, Lady Roden entered the hall. She did not expect to see the scene, but exclaimed, "Your Majesty!" Thus Lady Roden watched the scene where the emperor and empress lay on the ground, both in the rain, in the mud. Nothing is clear. What is happening here? Yvonne quickly pulled herself together. She got up and guiltily began to ask for forgiveness. She said that everything happened suddenly, and she herself did not understand anything. But she did not want such a development of events. Carloy also began to slowly get up. He asked why this happened. Yvonne bowed her head and still guiltily mouthed the words of forgiveness. She excused herself by saying that it seemed to her that something was falling on the emperor. She was scared and her body was falling by itself. It's subconscious. She just wanted to protect the emperor with her own body. Carloy, coming to his senses, in the presence of all the servants and Lady Roden, began to speak. He said that the branch did not fall on him, so the empress should not have done what she did. Yvonne took her own dress in her fist in order to control herself and began to rub it hard. She said that she did not have time to think, and if another person stood in the place of the emperor, she would have done exactly the same. Carloy, without any irritation, but rather with a hint of excitement, asked if everything was okay with the girl. After receiving a positive answer, he announced that their conversation was over and Yvonne should go to her place. She obeyed the order. She turned around and headed for the exit. He looked at her at that time. Something pinched him, but he did not yet understand this feeling. Yvonne met Lady Roden. She politely greeted me first, bowing. Carloy, in order to diffuse the situation, let Lady Delois know that he had called Keanu. The emperor watched the scene of their meeting with interest. The empress, without even turning around, said that she had no doubts. She was worried. The emperor felt the same. Yvonne and her maid went to the rooms. Kiana watched them leave. She was still amazed at what she saw. Lady Roden abruptly turned to face the emperor and asked with interest why the emperor's ears were red. She understood everything well. However, Carloy waved it off. He explained this by the fact that the empress pressed his head when she fell. He ordered Kiana to go inside and tell her everything she wanted. The girl boringly agreed and followed the emperor. Horton was then ordered by Carloy to wait outside. The two of them entered the middle. Kiana walked through the garden and admired the flowers. Their scent beckoned her, as if they had been grown by magic. The girl voiced her own thoughts out loud, but the Emperor just rolled his eyes and wondered what she wanted to tell him. Lady Roden finally began to speak. Her father provided some references and she has information of interest to the Emperor. Kian first asked if she was wrong that the Emperor had been kidnapped 14 years ago. That was true. She went on to say that after this incident, the Duke of Delois dismissed all his servants. Carloy did not understand what the girl was getting at. Why expel all the servants? It turns out that people were released only in words. Half of them were killed, the other half went missing. In general, according to Kiana, these are 200 people. No one was left alive. She asked what the Emperor thought about it. He clearly began to understand that there was a connection between the kidnapping and the murders. Otherwise, there was no point in leaving the lives of so many people. Young people talked. Lady Orden agreed that there was a connection, but what it might mean was still unclear. Evidence should have been left in the Duke's house. Kiana came up with this. After that incident, the Duke changed the entire service in the court, so today no one knows about that incident. Therefore, you need to find someone alive who knows something. But the results will not come soon. It is a difficult and long process. The Emperor was getting angry. So what does Kiana suggest? And she mysteriously started talking about the fact that there is one person. Stroking the flowers, she continued. A person who is close to the Duke's family was there all the time and caught the events in his mind. Plucking a white lily, she announced that that person was right now next to the Emperor. He took the flower and supported the plan to win Yvonne's heart and make her his man. Breaking the lily, the Emperor said that the only problem that makes it impossible to fulfill the plan is hatred, reciprocal and extremely strong, which cannot be overcome. However, Lady Roden gave a completely thorough answer. Lady Delois only hates the Emperor because of his attitude towards her. No one could love their abuser. These words surprised the Emperor and even made him laugh. The girl also laughed and said that she only expressed her own assumptions and ideas. Kiana added that if you look at the behavior of the Empress during the meal, and today's look, the girl has no hatred for the Emperor. She only suffocates from his wrongs. But Carloy also had arguments. He is the man who wishes Yvonne's father dead. Will she choose him instead of her father? She can't be that much of a snow queen. Kiana remembered her father. He is extremely kind and caring to her, a complete counterbalance to the Duke of Delois. And compared to other parents, he allowed the girl a lot, gave her freedom of choice. But when it came to getting engaged, Kiana said she would only marry for love. Assigned the contract with the Emperor only for one reason, even knowing that her own actions could ruin her father's reputation. Carloy came closer and asked what she wanted to say. Lady Roden continued. She told the Emperor to think about how Yvonne felt in a situation where her father, not at all gentle and decent, forced her to marry a stranger who hated her. The Emperor stopped the girl, plunged into thought and replied that he would think about it. Kiana thanked her and asked if she could go, because she was not feeling well because of the sharp aroma of flowers. However, the Emperor stopped her, told her to wait. He asked an important question. Does the girl understand how cruel her plan is because playing with feelings is much tougher than throwing cold insults? When she loves, her heart shines. She herself will blossom and reveal all her father's secrets. But he soon learns that love is a delusion. Her heart will break, she herself will break, she will have nothing left. Her father is evil, and it was he who gave her in marriage. Kiana's love makes you close your eyes to many things, and with your eyes closed you can make any concessions in the name of love. She spoke, turning her back to the boy and staring into the distance. This is exactly what the girl is hinting at. Her eyes lit up. Love. It was because of her that the ruling dynasty weakened. For the sake of his beloved, Kiana's grandfather waged a war. In the name of love, terrible things were done. The grandfather lost the war, and because of this, the Delois family ascended to the throne. For the Emperor, this love was complete nonsense, he said, still holding a barely alive lily in his hand. He threw the flower and replied that such a strong feeling only causes destruction, and that is why he should not feel it. He closed the door behind him and returned to the yard. The Emperor was just having dinner. His assistant reported that there was no editorial office. Carloy concluded that after his marriage, no more attempts were made to poison him. He continued to think aloud. The emperor has been avoiding the empress for a year, and later he will marry a new woman. The duke definitely hates him, but it's strange that everything is quiet so far. With anxiety in his voice and eyes, the boy reported that the duke's inactivity was making him nervous. The aide replied to such reflections that it was not profitable for the Duke of Deloy to harm the emperor. He is not that reckless. The emperor agreed to this. He understands very well that the duke begins to act only in special cases. But the problem is that the guy does not know these damn cases and when their time will come. Horton turned the conversation to the empress. She has been quiet lately, probably busy preparing the ceremony. The emperor replied that he did not know what was on the mind of either the duke or his daughter. But Horton didn't understand how Yvonne could harm the emperor if Carloy didn't even let her near him. Their conversation was interrupted by Kiana, who ran into the hall. Today she was wearing a bright red dress that accentuated her black hair and brown eyes. A strange letter came to her room. It was announced that Duke Delois intended to poison Lady Rodin at the coronation ceremony. She interrupted that this was good news, because they were not going to poison the emperor, but her. However, it is impossible to bribe her servants and she is sure of it. However, the girl has no immunity to poison. The emperor suggested that it might be a decoy. After all, he never received such letters. And no one from Duke Deloy's entourage would betray him. They decided to get to the bottom of it. After all, plans can change and there is no point in conducting an investigation now. Everything is too confusing. There is only one way out. Kiana should be the bait. She's embarrassed by this, but it's a smart, well-thought-out move that can be successful. And so the day of the coronation of the second empress came. The ceremony was in full swing. Everything is organized at the highest level. People can be heard laughing. Music is playing, and dancing is going on. The emperor passionately spins Keanu in the dance. He compliments her on her looks. She coquettishly thanks him. Lady Rodin is indeed looking gorgeous today. A delicate pink and white dress that emphasizes the waist. A beautiful hairstyle, expensive diamonds. Carloy himself is not far behind in a luxurious white jacket with the emperor's red uniforms. The holiday was really successful. People in delight. Everyone admires the couple and their love and dreams of the same family. In the dance, the couple analyzes the events. So far, nothing extraordinary has happened. But everything is just beginning. Everything is carefully monitored. Every situation that may arise is foreseen. Kiana leans against the emperor. He says that she drank the antidote, but it is difficult to expect what. And who could have sent that letter? But the most important thing is whether it was true. And if so, when and how will the ordination take place? But could the Duke dare to take such a step when so many witnesses were nearby? And maybe Yvonne is behind it all. When she entered the hall in a beautiful dress of a purple shade and flowing golden hair, everyone held their breath. The emperor immediately stopped dancing with Kiana, told her to rest and approached Lady Delois. Carloy expressed satisfaction with the organization of the holiday. He liked everything. He is extremely grateful and imagines how difficult it was for her. Yvonne did not react at all to the compliment in her direction. She remained indifferent and cold. She understood how hypocritical everyone was. But Carloy continued to praise the empress. I asked if she really organized all this by herself without any help. But, of course, he couldn't remind her that if Yvonne did something wrong, she would forever be empress. She did not understand what he meant. The emperor explained. He means if Yvonne hurts Kiana, she will be in trouble. If something happens to the second empress, all the blame will fall on her shoulders because she was the one who organized the holiday. Yvonne began to get nervous. She took the edges of the dress in her fist to calm herself, tried to hold herself in her hands with all her might. Without any emotion, Yvonne replied that she would never hurt anyone. She is not like that, and I understood everything. The celebration continued. The emperor, next to whom his two empresses were standing, made a toast to the glory of the Croatian Empire, who knew it was not poisoned wine, but everyone drank it with the same thoughts. Nothing happened to the emperor. Yvonne took the second glass. After her, Kiana. But suddenly everything changed. People started screaming, running for help. Something terrible happened, but how is it possible? Yvonne began to choke on blood. Carloy quickly caught his wife. The girl's wine was poisoned. The girl slowly melted in the arms of the emperor, who called out the name of his wife and did not understand how this could happen, because he suspected her, but believed that Kiana would be the victim. There could be no mistake. Everyone knew about the places. The emperor quickly took control of himself. He squeezed his wife tightly, took the antidote from his own pocket and poured it into Yvonne's mouth in one fell swoop. Kiana did not understand anything. How could this happen? What kind of delusion, after all? Why poison Yvonne? It was all incomprehensible. She could not control herself, could not understand anything. At that moment, everyone turned their attention to the Empress's glass. The color of the wine changed, and poison was found in the glass itself. The emperor announced that the Empress had been poisoned. All entrances and exits must be closed immediately. The order was immediately carried out. At the regular meeting, the emperor could not understand why no evidence was found about the poisoning of the Empress. A full hall of people and not a single witness. How is this possible? The assistant, drenched in sweat, replied that the fact is that everyone who had anything to do with the poisoning is dead. And this was not a servant of the Empress. He was an experienced person who thought everything through clearly. She did not leave any evidence. She thought everything through extremely well. And only Duke de Lois is capable of such a thing. After all, who else in the court could dare to poison the Empress? Marquis Rodin, Kiana's father, also shares this point of view. Everything was organized by Yvonne herself, and who could harm her when she was watching everything? Arguments started at the meeting. Everyone suspected each other and didn't trust anyone. A real mess ensued. But all this was quickly stopped by the emperor. Despite the pain in his head, he condemned the recklessness of the advisors, because their arguments now will not help anything, but rather the opposite. But could the Duke poison his own daughter? That day he looked too excited. He had never been seen like that before. There are two options here. Either the Duke mixed up Kiana and Yvonne's glasses, or someone did it on purpose. However, no one approached the table except for one person. The emperor was in the chambers of the Empress. He talked to the doctor about the girl's health. He assured that the condition is stable, and soon the Empress will come to her senses. Fortunately, she drank a little poison and immediately drank the antidote. The emperor understood and ordered to leave him. He looked at the weak Yvonne, thought that 4 days had already passed and did not understand why he had come here in the first place. Maybe he really didn't want her to leave him that day. Now rumors will spread that she is dear to him. After all, it's not even funny. He pounced on her with suspicions, and it turns out that she was injured herself. Only she could know about everything in advance and change the glass. But why did she drink it? The emperor thought, looking at his dark wife, who despite her paleness and weakness, still remained magically beautiful. Was she really out of her mind? A cold sweat broke out on the girl's face. Carloy thought that she could have such a terrible dream. The girl raised her voice and slowly opened her eyes. She said the name Carl. He looked at his wife in amazement and stutteringly asked what she had just said. She quickly answered that she herself did not understand. It was a dream and closed her eyes again. Sweat broke out on the emperor's face. He decided that the Empress was delusional, but he began to worry about her. However, why did she say the name Carl? Does she have another husband with that name? He hasn't been called that for a long time. She reminds him of the person he last saw only as a child, but which he misses very much. However, they are not at all similar. Why does she not get out of his head? He thought that he was also losing his mind. Because why would Yvonne Delois do such a thing? He remembered her words that it was all for his own good, that she tried to live like a gray mouse not to disturb him. Her question is whether she is capable of harming someone. Now the answer is obvious. He remembered her in the blood, remembered the feeling, everything that happened that day. No, it's delusional. Yvonne has no reason to drink poison. However, he remembered Kiana's words again that Yvonne had no reason to hate him. He remembered the situation in the garden, when she fell on him, tried to protect. What if Kiana is really right? His wife does not hate him. She has feelings. She is extremely fragile, and he abused her so much. But his thoughts were interrupted by Yvonne. She left, got up, and asked what Carloy was doing here. He explained with a worried look that the girl drank poison 4 days ago and passed out. He talked about the details of that day and inquired about her well-being. She replied that she was a little dizzy, but everything was fine. She was surprised, weak, and defenseless. So fragile that it means everything, thought the emperor. She did not understand why he did not ask who did it, why he was so calm. But he directly asked the question whether she knew about her father's plan. They looked at each other. The girl did not understand. Carloy began to say that Yvonne was calm when he talked to her about Kiana's poison. So she had to know everything. and the letter of her hands on the right. But Yvonne did not understand anything. She didn't want to hurt anyone and didn't know anything. He asked her about Carl's name, which she was saying, but she answered that Carla felt it. However, he remembered the conversation with Kiana about the person who is there for all the tragic days, who knows everything, who needs to be loved. He gently took the girl's hand and spoke her name. Yvonne was startled. Sweat broke out on her face. But Carloy replied that he was worried about the girl, which she did not expect at all. Time for Carloy and Yvonne's wedding. The door creaks. Two people enter the room where Yvonne is sitting, one of whom is Hans de Lois. He calls the surprised girl by name. The Duke informs Yvonne that in a few days she will become the Emperor's wife. The girl is shocked by this news. She turns her head sharply in the direction of Hans de Lois and looks at him in fear, trying to understand whether she heard him. The Duke pretends that he does not understand what caused such great surprise. He tells Yvonne to do as she is told and not even think of resisting. Hans de Lois's heavy hand falls on the fragile girl's shoulder and squeezes it. The Duke urges Yvonne to think of her poor mother. It is interesting that at the same time, for some reason, he calls his daughter by another name, Lillian Lu. The girl's face radiates anger and sadness at the same time. Lillian Lu begins to remember her story. It turns out that the girl is the illegitimate daughter of Hans de Lois. Instead of luxurious dresses, little Lillian Lu wore some tattered rags. The room of Hans de Lois's daughter became a dark basement, from which she was not allowed to leave. Father bullied Lillian Lu in every possible way. For example, when the girl tried to rebel, the Duke beat her so that there was no living space left on the child's body. At the mention of all this, already grown Lillian Lu's blood begins to boil in her veins. The girl's fingers tightly squeeze the dress. Lillian Lu does not like that she has become a victim of the Duke's dirty games. Hans de Lois does not pay attention to his daughter's irritation. He continues to calmly walk around the room and talks about Lillian Lu's future as the Emperor's wife. In the end, the Duke sits down on the sofa and says that the girl must not tell anyone about her fate, or he, Hans de Lois, will do something to her mother. But a simple promise from Lillian Lu to her father is not enough. He calls to him the man who had been silently watching the conversation between Hans de Lois and the girl all this time. The face of the stranger cannot be seen, but he himself is dressed in a cloak with a diamond clasp. Sweat stands out on Lillian Lu's face. The girl looks seriously scared, looking at the strange guest. The Duke, whose hands are folded on his knees, calmly explains to his daughter that the stranger is a magician whom he has been looking for a long time. This mage must cast a silencing spell on Lillian Lu. That way the girl won't be able to tell the truth until the wizard and her father are dead. The mage begins to cast a spell, holding his hands near Lillian Lu's head and muttering some words. The wizard's long fingers, decorated with silver rings, look tense. Black smoke and long chains appear in the air and seem to wrap around Lillian Lu. At this moment, the girl is sitting without moving. The wizard finishes casting his spell on Lillian Lu. Finally, he says that as soon as the girl starts talking too much, her voice will disappear. If the girl wants to write the truth on paper, her hand will stop moving. Lillian Lu's head was filled with a sharp pain. The Duke stands next to the wizard and tells his daughter that she must give birth to the Emperor's heir if he wishes. The girl feels a deep disgust for the events that just happened, but does not show it. She tells her father that she will do whatever is asked of her, so he doesn't have to worry about it. However, Hans de Lois does not believe Lillian Lu, reminding his daughter how she let him down once. The girl clutches her dress with fingers white with anger. Lillian Lu is annoyed that her father keeps scolding her because of an incident that happened 14 years ago. Hans de Lois sharply directs, full of fury, his gaze at his daughter. He tells her that she did wrong back then, 14 years ago. Because of this, now he will have to assign servants to the girl who will monitor her behavior. Lillian Lu humbly lowered her head and agreed with her father. True, the thoughts of Hans de Lois's daughter do not correspond to her words at all. The girl believes that that time she did nothing wrong but only rescued an innocent child who was stolen from captivity. The Duke continues to educate his daughter. The girl listens and agrees with everything. Hans de Lois then turns and walks away, leaving his daughter alone with her thoughts. Lillian Lu feels confused. The girl wonders what will happen if she really misbehaves. Will the Emperor rise against the Duke? After some thought, Lillian Lu realizes that Carloy would never do that. The girl plunges into memories of that incident 14 years ago. Then she, being a little girl, was doing some work. and suddenly she heard someone quarreling in the prison. Lillian Lu wanted to know who it was. She went inside and saw a black-haired boy, about the same age as her. The boy's hands were tied with a rope, and he himself said that the Duke had killed his entire family, even his father. Surprised, Lillian Lu asked, "Why would he do that?" The boy, crying, replied that his family was very rich, and the Duke had killed them all because of his unbridled lust for money. The girl did not immediately believe it, because the Duke himself is a very wealthy person. Why does he need even more wealth? The prisoner, whose face was mixed with rage and sadness, said that he would definitely stay alive and kill the offender of his family. Lillian Lu wiped the tears from the boy's face, trying to calm him down. But unfortunately, he did not appreciate such a show of concern, and told the girl to take her hands off him. The Duke's daughter became angry at this and grabbed the boy by the cheeks, ordering that he would now learn what dirty hands are. The captive cooled down a little and, grimacing in pain, said, "It hurts me. Why are you staring at me like that, boy?" Lillian Lu became even more angry with the future emperor because he mistook her for a boy. The girl put her hands on her waist and ordered the captive to repeat what he said. The boy instead asked how old Lillian Lu was, but she was in no hurry to answer. Suddenly their eyes met. A spark flew between Carloy and the Duke's daughter. Lillian Lu leans back on the soft back of the chair and returns to reality. The girl thinks that Carloy, who fiercely hated Hans de Lois, is unlikely to treat his daughter well. The girl raises her hand and looks at it. Lillian Lu realizes that she has changed a lot since her first meeting with Carloy. The young emperor, most likely, will not see in her the girl who saved him 14 years ago. The Duke's daughter realizes that she is sick of being like her father. A girl does not want to be a copy of a person whom she hates with all her heart. Lillian daydreams for a moment. It occurs to her that when she saved Carloy, she should come up with a sign by which they would be able to recognize each other now. The girl remembers how she said goodbye to the boy. They stood in the middle of the forest, holding hands. Carloy smiled gently and promised Lillian Lu that he would never forget her. The Duke's daughter is sad when she remembers this touching moment. Lillian Lu knows that a lot has changed since then, and there is no way to turn back these changes. The only thing that remained unchanged was her memory of Carloy's promise. The girl begs God to hear her and make the emperor recognize in his charming bride the thin girl with short hair who once saved him. A lonely tear falls on Lillian Lu's hand. The girl imagines how the young emperor looks now, and can no longer hold back tears. Lillian Lu gently whispers her lover's name, and asks him to remember her as soon as he hears her voice. Pictures appear in the girl's head that soothe and tear her heart at the same time. In the first picture, she and Carloy, now adults, are holding hands, their gazes radiating all-encompassing tenderness and love. The second picture reproduces the painful moment of their farewell, which took place 14 years ago. The boy holds Lillian Lu's hand and tells her that with him she will never suffer, because he, Carloy, will always protect her. But will the emperor fulfill the promise made in childhood? Carloy and Yvonne's wedding day. The ringing of the bell is heard. The Duke brings his daughter to the emperor. He wishes Yvonne a happy life, but the girl is not moved by this. She just stands and indifferently looks behind her father. The Duke hugs Yvonne and whispers to the girl that her mother's life is in his hands. The girl exhales sharply through pursed lips and mentally curses her father. Yvonne lets go of her father's hand and approaches the groom. Yvonne's big emerald eyes look at Carloy. The girl mentally begs the groom to recognize her, but the emperor's gaze is cold and indifferent. Their hands come apart. Carloy turns and walks sharply towards the door. Without turning to Yvonne, he tells her the following phrase: "The wedding with you makes me sick to my soul." Yvonne is upset and confused. The miracle she hoped for did not happen. The bride remains alone among a bunch of guests. Her hands are pressed to her chest and her look speaks of disappointment and resentment. The girl almost cries and thinks that the emperor has become a fool with a complex character.